hearts beat to the city streets. We began to feel the fire. We rise like tall buildings as the chemicals, they take us higher. The night's young and it's just begun as she puts her hand in mine. We wanna chase the night, wanna dance to the light, pull the stars from the sky, just two hearts running wild. Never sleep, never stop, as we shout from the top. We're gonna be two hearts running wild. Now the morning is the afternoon. We lay awake in bed. The laughs so loud as the hours pass. We're gonna do it all again. We wanna chase the night, wanna dance to the light, pull the stars from the sky, just two hearts running wild. Never sleep, never stop, as we shout from the top. We're gonna be, we're gonna be two hearts running wild.
Okay, how's everybody doing? So what I want to do is I want to take you on I'll give you a major update on the channel and take you on a tour. This is section 3, there's section 2, section 1, and it's probably, it's directed towards all the subscribers that are current on the channel now, but a lot for the newer subscribers as well that have come to the channel in the last few months or so. And this is in part to just inform them and show them, give them some context, like greater context about what's really going on with this layout. So this layout is 57 inches above the floor of the track level, and it's 26 feet long from the beginning of section 1, not the far end of the ferry, to the edge there that you see, like this balsa wood section right here where the intersection is at Crush Crescent and Glover Road. So there's room for 2 more sections, which is awesome, which is in planning, and which will probably be, like, I'll probably have a fiddle yard or staging yard so I can run longer trains, like have these units bringing in cars off the layout. Like staging, I know it's a lot of talk about staging, but staging is basically a platform that facilitates the imaginary world of the railroad that you build, like where the bridge traffic comes from or goes to, right? Like there's always an element of imagination on a model railroad that you can't build because you don't have the room to do it. And what room you do have, you want to save for, like, well, it depends on the modeling style that you do, but I like to do signature scenes and then sew them together. Like I'm not worried about what's in between each scene, whether it makes logical sense, because I just use trees to pacify the logic, right? So if I have a signature scene here and then one here from the same railroad, like SRY perhaps, but it doesn't make logical sense because where's the scene between them? Like I just fill it with trees like I did on section 2, which I'll point that out when we go down there. And then I'll add in scenes, but they're all experiences that I've had on the real railroad. Like you don't have to build a model railroad of a railroad that you experience, but it helps if you see the trains, you feel the rumble, you hear the spitter valves, you smell the diesel. You can incorporate that passion into whatever railroad you decide to model, whether it's Canadian Pacific Railroad or Milwaukee Road or whatever, right? But it helps to experience something to do with the hobby that you're in, which is one of the reasons why I left military modeling, decades ago, because it was always based on photographs and in a sort of obscure history that I never experienced. But anyway, I want you to experience some of this layout. So what I'm going to do is talk briefly about each section, bring the camera, like reset the camera up to different stations, because I don't want to move it around and upset, anybody that might be sensitive to that. And I want to just keep it steady so you can look at the details and so on. So that's what I'm going to do. So before I move from section 3 to section 2 over there, I'll just point out what's going on here. You can see in the foreground, that's going to be crushed crescent. There's a lot of detail that's going to go in there. Eventually, like there's a crossing gate, there's lights, there's so much going on. And the grain elevator, like I haven't built the bins behind. Like originally, like this is 2 feet, right? 2 feet by all the way down 8 feet. So it's like I didn't have room before when I first built that grain elevator, which is going to get re-and-reed and added to. I'm going to fix the cage ladders, etc. But now I get to model this whole scene faithfully to the prototype of Milner, which is on Glover Road in Crushed Crescent, which I'm really happy about, although it's been compressed, right, to fit the convenience of the model railroad, or the compromises that we have to make in order to make things work. And then, of course, down here will be a ridge with trees. So the great pacifier, right, model trees, that helps us go from one scene to another so it's not so abrupt. And then behind there, like that's like on this plate, here's going to be Ipex Plastics. That's another project. There's this background scene, the sort of rural farm scene, and then the intersection. So let's move down, and I want to set up the camera down by Duncan Way here, and then we'll talk about that as well, okay? Okay, so this is Duncan Way, and I love this scene. You know what? When I set out to actually sort of design and compose this scene and actually model it into place like this, I didn't think that much about it, because like I wanted to do it because I frequent the area, and that's where I do a lot of rail fending when it comes to SRY in terms of switching out a local, and it's the perfect location or local to model because it has a road and an overpass. And there's no better way to view a local, either from the road where there's no fence and an overpass you can see from above. So what I'll do is I'll just share some photos that I took. I have probably 1,000 photos of this area, and I actually referred to a lot of them when I was modeling this area. So I'll just show you some of those photos, and then I'll explain to you what I basically improvised or changed in order to make it suitable for River Road, okay? Okay, so you can see also that the bridge itself, I used photos extensively and tried to keep it as prototypical as I could. I mean, it's only a small section of it, but everything on this particular layout in this scene is on an angle. Like this overpass is not square to the layout face. It's on a little bit of an angle. You can see the sweeping curves of the track. Even the road has a curve in it. And the actual prototype bridge has a curve further down, which you can sort of see in the photo there. And then the road turns to the right. So I'm really pleased with the way that turned out. And I'm really happy about this location as an operation too, because it's like a choke point. And I think choke points are good subjects to model in model railroading if you want to see a lot of action and a lot of locomotives idling and switching directions and things like that, okay? So I want to show you a couple more angles, and one most notably those buildings back there, the slum landlord, and explain to you why I did it the way I did that, okay? And then we'll have another view above the overpass as we move down to section 1, okay? Okay, so here is the scene just beyond the overpass. I had to remove the overpass just so that you could see all of it, because the overpass would sort of block like where my hand is. Now there's two scenes merged into one. Like this is a kind of radical compression, I would call it, or overlapping compression. So let me just try to flesh that out a bit. So this building is prototypical, as is these this track, etc., in Duncan Way. Now, this building prototypically is 5 times longer than this model. If I modeled this building to prototypical length, it would go all the way down to Axton steel. Okay, so I had to compress the length of it to make it work, because I'm more about the scene where I'm standing and what I see in the aperture view of the live view of what I see and what I'm focused on. That's how I model. On the other hand, these two buildings, which don't really belong here, are the next layer back, because I like to, this is why I like to model 2 feet. Like I know people say, well, you know, 16 inches is enough. Sure, it can be, but it depends on the style of your modeling. I like about as much depth. Like the track ratio here is probably 35% track and then, you know, 65% scenery. That's the ratio I like to model in. However, these two buildings are exactly like the prototype. Same height, same width, windows, everything, like to a T. I didn't have to compress them at all, except I cut them, you know, in half or whatever, or more than half to fit against the, you know, the backdrop. Okay, and then the overpass kind of helps that merge into the backdrop, whatever. But these two buildings are like, you know, 25 miles away. So why are they here? Well, because I couldn't put them anywhere, and I wanted to capture the spirit of New West, like at the waterfront. So if you remove this building, the tracks on the waterfront look just like this, and so does that building, except where this building is, there's a parkade. But if you're going by in the train and you look, you'll see this blue building and the slum landlord. Slum landlord is just a term that I named that building. I don't even know what it's really called, but it's modeled faithfully to the prototype. And then when you go down further down, which you will, and you look this way, you can see it creates a really cool alley effect. And it just reminds me of the area that I walked and photographed, and I saw trains going by like CN, CP, SRY, and I thought, well, this is sort of iconic. I'll model this because it has character, right? So that's like an overlapping compression. I freelanced 2 prototypical buildings, compressed one, kept one to the exact size, and that's what I got. So you know what I mean? So anything goes on the layout if it suits your desire, your passion, your modeling style. Just do whatever you want. So I'm going to go down now and have a look this way as we move down to Axton Steel in section 1 and then further up to the barge slip, okay? Okay, so this is the middle of section 2. This is one of my favorite scenes. In fact, every time I pull up to the scene, you know, or walk up to it from my bench, which is directly down below, it feels like the first time I've seen it. Like, I don't know why that is. I never seem to grow tired of it. Like, you know, like I've been in the game a while, and a lot of you probably have too. You know how you have certain scenes on your layout, which I'll show you one later. It's like just, it just doesn't have it, right? Like, it's not your favorite scene, I guess. I always want to remain positive and always be ready or willing to restroke a scene or add something that might really change it. Like, sometimes it can be a utility pole, a group of trees, a sign, a vehicle. Like, you just don't know. That's why scenes like this take a really long time to develop. Like, this was a point in the development as I've moved from section 1, which is on the left, which we'll get to soon, and then to the right is a sort of unfolding it like a novel. It's the way I stay inspired. I don't get too far ahead and get burned out or whatever. But of course, there's none of those feelings right now. But, you know, I just want to say that I had a real block here, like right where the signal is, you know, like this knoll, the grassy knoll, you know, there's the old widow up there, and there's another sort of middle-aged guy that's not really sure what he wants to do in life and looking out the window there. But, you know, that all took time. Like, the figurines part for me comes like near the end, I guess, of a particular scene, I guess. Now, a couple other things about this is, like, people, right? Like, I know people have mentioned, oh, you're going to put figurines in the scene and everything. And yeah, okay, sure. But I don't want to force the narrative. Like, I want people to look at the scene and not have too many distractions, and sort of have this sort of virtual feeling of walking around the scene themselves, and letting the scene, you know, interpret what they feel about it or whatever. Like, I could easily say that, you know, the widow up on the grassy knoll, it sort of is indicative of my grandmother, who came out of the 20s and 30s, you know, during the Depression, was hardworking, didn't have much, but gave everything to my father and mother for my brothers and I, so that we could have a home. Like, she sacrificed her whole life and all her life savings just so that I could, like I'm here today because of her. You know, bless her heart, right? And I guess in a way, like, art or models, when we create, like, we don't realize it, but a lot of the experiences that we have in our past and history influence how we do things, how we paint, how we model, quirky little things that someone might not understand. We have a reason for doing them. And that is why I think the model railroad is just the most awesome art form to express, you know, like, each individual, like, according to their own way of, you know, seeing things, right? So I want to move down to the left, down to where well, I'll just keep panning, but I'll reset up the camera over here. And I want to talk about the station, which people have said, oh, it doesn't fit there, you know. And I get that, and I know what they mean, and I don't disagree with them, but I want to just talk a little bit about it, explain to you why I built it and why I put it here in the sort of, I take freelance license over the, you know, the prototypical influence that I like to apply on this layout, okay? So the Slumlord Alley was a real blocking point, but I eventually gave it time, walked away, came back, and it worked out okay. Okay, so this is just a few feet down now from where we just were, and I love this scene. Like, this is, like, I know I said the scene prior to this, the Slumlord Alley, was one of my favorites. This is as well, and it's only 2 feet away, really, like, west of, you know, that warehouse district. And I really, like, when I did this piece, this was just before I got blocked, you know, before I got up to the section where the alleyway was, and I was really on a flow. But I hadn't put the station in here yet. And if you want to see the build on the station, if you just go to the community tab and to the right, there's a little magnifying glass, and if you type station there, it'll pull up the 3 parts. And I cover it quite comprehensively, and there's a lot to learn there. Like, I learned a lot from it, and I basically go over most of it. and it was a really fun build, and I learned a lot. Although I don't recommend doing shingles by hand. You know, well, I use strip, but I wanted to have a little varied sort of, if you look at the roof closely, you'll see the sort of varied shingles, and some of them, are not exactly sitting flush. I wanted it to have a little bit of age to it, even though it's a restored station. This is a 1920s Canadian Northern Railway station, which were really common in the West. And I built it from Charles Bohai's book called Canadian Nationals Western Depots, the country stations in Western Canada. Now, lucky for me is there's one of these like 1 kilometer away or less from where I live, perfectly restored in this exact configuration. I didn't put Fort Langley on it yet on here because I wasn't even sure that I was going to put this particular station on the layout, because it seemed odd when you were transitioning from Axton Steel to this section. But if I split the sections, this scene would stand on its own. Combined, it's still okay because I can look at it from this direction. And it's actually one of the scenes that I don't need not one train to feel comfort from it, like to feel like I never get tired of looking at this either, because it's so indicative of where I live and what Canadian railroads are, right? And so I was more into the catching, the emotion and the passion of this right-of-way and big trees that are so common out here, like in my neighborhood and all over British Columbia, especially southern British Columbia, that I just had to build it. And the station, I thought, well, I'm going to put it right here. I'm going to nestle it in, and it sits beautifully from this angle, and I really love it. You can see the signals. So there's the dwarf signal here, and then there's this absolute, red, like meaning, like it's absolute, like you can't go if it's red. And it interlocks out from, like the main from the diverging route a ways up. And I really love it because it allows me to escape the sort of modern railroad for a moment as I'm operating if I want. And it just seemed to feel just right. Now, the section to the left, like, would be kind of jarring if you went from Axton Steel to suddenly there's this station from 1920. How do you justify that? Well, it's restored. Excuse me. Like, it's restored just like the prototype is. Like, the prototype down the road was moved like a couple hundred yards and pushed back from the track. So it's just a tourist attraction. So it's a bit of a tourist attraction for me on the railroad, and that's why I put it here. And it fits with the background of the big trees and so on. So just in closing on this, like, I spent about a year on this whole scene that you see right here, like the station and the trees and just everything about it was, well, probably more than a year, but I'd say sort of hands-on. It took me a year. It took me quite a while to get everything just right, just the way I wanted it. And I'm really, once again, very pleased with it, because when I stand up from my bench, I can just look at this and I just enjoy staring at it. Okay, so let's move over now to the last section, section 1, which is actually the first section of the layout when you come into the room. And I'll talk to you about that. And it's very almost strictly based on the prototype footprint, with some compromises and a little bit of freelance or artistic licenses as well, in the same way that I did this. But this scene, compared to the one on section 1, this is freelance. As you see, it's completely freelance, but with a prototypical feel. And that's, you should settle yourself with that. Like, don't, like, I'll just say this, I was going to wait to the end, but I'll just say this, like don't allow prototype influences to force you into a type of legalism. Like, I must do this because, the gatekeeper, the prototypical gatekeeper says it must be done this way. Like, just forget that. Like, don't let that stop you from modeling a subject that you're really passionate about and you want to build into your layout, okay? So prototypical influence and subjects are fantastic. They drive modeling a railroad, right? But feel free to just do whatever you want if you feel you're passionate about it and it makes sense and feels like the real railroad, okay? You know, this is a perspective that some people like to view their layouts. Somebody asked a while back, you know, why do you have your bench work at chin height? Well, you know, from the previous views, especially the station, that's why I operate at that height. It looks way more realistic. I mean, you know, there's a lot to be seen here, but I don't operate from this perspective. I don't mind showing it or looking at it sometimes like this, but anyway, let's have a look at the Axton Steel section here, and I basically want to just describe to you like this section from, like, this is the end of section 1. It's important to the whole theme of section 1, which is very prototypical. Like, this parking lot's obviously been compressed. I've beat it into submission, right? But I kept, you know, the general feel of it, right? Even though I had to shrink it down like square inch wise or whatever. But you can notice how I maintain, you know, oblique angles and curved lines and the curved track. It just helps everything. Like, it's easier to look at, you know. Now, when you pan down to the barge slip, which I'm going to do, we're going to move down there and you'll see the ferry and so on. Axton Steel is very, very, very important to this whole scene. Although I'll just say this. I chose to shoot it from this angle because it doesn't look like a whole, like, well, it just looks different when you do trackside level. It's not that exciting really to look at. Now, here's the thing. Every layout has a, like a, a dumping ground or a boring section, right? And I always pass over this section. Like, it serves its purpose. I come back to it and tweak a few details. You'll always notice in content, oh, he's got a new truck, or he rearranged that, or what are those crates there on the left, or, oh, he added a tree, right? You added the tree because it was so boring, you know. But anyway, it serves its purpose, and we all have layouts with sections like this, but I haven't given up on it. When I struggle with it, or it doesn't meet or click with my, you know, satisfaction or whatever, I just come back to it a month later or whatever, and I'll hit it, like, you know, like something will do it, right? But I'm not worried about that right now. But let's take a look down here, and this is my favorite part of section 1 of what we're about to see, and I just love it because it's really central to a lot of the operations. Even though on the upper tractor you can see there's, you know, the warehouse and the transload at Axton Steel, but that, you know, where the yellow painted track is, that's the main that goes down to the brewery, right, which is kind of a neat operation as well. But then, of course, in the foreground, that track with the two EMD units there, MU'd with the flat cars, this is the main operation for bridge traffic on this end of the layout. Remember I talked about that on the other end will be the same, but not a ferry. But here, the traffic that comes in, like, it doesn't matter. Like, I don't need to model that. I modeled the ferry, but wherever the ferry goes or comes back with, it doesn't really matter, right? Because it introduces new rolling stock, etc., bridge traffic onto River Road for operations and so on, okay? Okay, so I almost forgot about this little scene right here, this movie studio or soundstage. This is the baby warehouse, I call it. It's the one of the 3 buildings that's in between the brewery on the left and the long warehouse on the right. Now, when I built this, it was just a plain tilt-up, prototypically, I mean, like the warehouse. And so I just decided I wanted to have a little bit of fun with it. And I thought that it would be a good little memoir and sort of indicative of, you know, several decades back when I worked in theater and film and museum work and stuff, and met my wife, you know, many decades ago, actually now. Boy, time flies, eh? And she had a studio for almost 30 years. So, you know, they say you should rejoice in the experiences of your youth, you know. So you can make of it what you want. I kind of like it. It's a sort of a scene that when you look through the trees, like if you can get past the barge slip, or if you're not distracted by that, it's there, you know. It's just a nice added little touch. And when you're down the far end by the brewery and you're switching and using it as a lead, etc., up past here, it's really cool view from way down the left there. Or even from this angle, as I'm standing in front of the layout, you see it like this as well. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is just let's jump to the sort of final part of the barge ramp and slip and or ferry slip itself, and then we'll just close with a few comments. Okay. Okay, how's everybody doing? So this is section 1, and this is my favorite shot, obviously, or part of the layout, because this is sort of the hub of all the operations that come into and off of River Road. Like I think I've mentioned it, well, I have talked quite a bit about this. If you go into the homepage and scroll back under videos, I've covered everything quite explicitly. In fact, the first component I built on River Road was this barge slip. Okay. I had plans for a barge. Well, like the ferry was always in the plan, but I just never knew when I'd get around to it until like last year, 2024, when I started in April and finished in around October. And I never stopped working on it. Like what I mean is I never got distracted. I knew, like I just know from experience, like if I took on other projects, which is why I stopped working on the tug. People have mentioned it before. It's underneath. It'll get done when it gets done. But this was the main primary model that I wanted to get done to bring this section to a form of completion. I mean, there's other little details to go, like these little kiosks. For some reason, I don't want to finish them because if I do, I feel like I got to let go of this section, and I don't want to really. It's sort of weird that way, how we have these little nuances, you know, when we build our layouts. And furthermore, I don't get too far ahead. So I have section 1 and 2, like I'm moving into 3 a bit, but I have 2 sections behind me now that are, you know, 90% or 95%. And I just say that because I always like to leave 5% for, you know, revisitations. Like actually there's fencing here. I got to do compound fencing here as well. Now, a couple things before I just show you a sample of pulling a car off during the closing of this is, somebody mentioned a while back, like how do you operate the brewery alley like when the ferry's docked up? Well, I'll show you. This is why I don't like duck unders, and I like an open horseshoe shaped layout, point to point. All right, so I don't have to duck under for anything really. So I mentioned at the beginning of this episode that the benchwork is, like the track is 57 inches high. So it comes to here, and I love that, right? Some people don't like that, and I get that. But for me, that's what I wanted. There were certain druthers, well, givens and druthers that I wanted on this layout. And I can look right down the brewery alley all the way down to Axton Steel and operate the warehouse there on the right, or the, you know, the brewery right here, and like just seeing the ferry and all the detail here on this side and looking down the barge slip. I don't even need to operate. Like the EMDs are idling on the ramp there, and like that is enough for me. Like I know that sounds weird, but when I do operate, it's a splendid experience for sure. And I'll just say I haven't really built up a spreadsheet for operations yet. I know what some of them are going to be. I'm going to have to do that at some point, but I'm not anxious about it. And I'll just come out from here. operations are going to be killer on this. Like if you're into the switching layout genre, like the amount of operations just on this section alone, and it's prototypical, is worthy of its size, right? Okay, so one of the main commodities that come off of this ferry onto Annacis Island in this case is basically liquefied petroleum from Vancouver Island, like off the old ENN Railroad. I mean, there would have been grain and logging equipment, other chemicals from paper mills and so on. But I find that this is really cool because I can simulate bridge traffic on and off the layout whenever I want. On the other end of Section 3, well actually, for now Section 3, but then there's 4 and 5 eventually, I'll do the same. I'll have stub end staging, right? So I just want to say thanks so much for supporting the channel. Thank you to all the new subscribers, all the loyal original subscribers as well for making this channel what it is, okay? Because it wouldn't be where it's at. And, you know, the more I work on this layout, like I feel more passionate about this layout now in 2025 than I ever did when I started it. And I was really passionate when I started it. And I'll just say this in closing, that part of the reason why I'm able to maintain passion and avoid burnout, because we all face it, is because of the methodology that I apply in terms of finishing sections. Like in this particular style of a layout, I don't know how people do the larger layouts. I've built larger layouts in the past, so I have them under my belt. But I had the option to build whatever I wanted because I knew that I had an opportunity in my life to do it. And I chose to do it in like a 12 by 12 room in the comfort of my own home that's climate controlled. And I never get tired of looking at this layout, and I love it. And it like size doesn't matter. When it comes to model railroading, it's all about maybe the feel, right? And the life that you instill into it. And if you're good with switching, like where the real railroading happens, like last mile ops, you'll be satisfied for years to come. Okay, so hopefully I'll be doing this for years to come and sharing it with you. So happy modeling, happy new year, and I hope that you have a great day.